I'm Jonathan Stein from Mother Jones Magazine. I'm here at the Conservative Political Action Conference, the largest gathering of conservative activists nationwide.
So what is it like being here in the belly of the beast the last couple of days?
I've been to these before, and they're almost always the most committed, hardcore right within the American right, and it's interesting because working for Mother Jones, I cover sort of mainstream political events and interact with a lot of our readers and people who share my viewpoint, and so it's very, very difficult to find this sort of viewpoint, especially because if you limit yourself, as most reporters do, to the coasts. I mean, Mother Jones is based in San Francisco. We have an office in D.C. So I think it's good to sort of get to talk to people who have come from all over the country and represent a viewpoint other than your own.
So what has been the dominant theme that you found in this conference?
I mean, it's the same thing you see in like every conservative conference these days in Washington and all over the country, which is that conservatives are trying to figure out their way back to power. They're trying to figure out the leaders who will take them back to power, the messages that will take them back to power, and the tactics that will take them back to power. Today in particular, there's been an emphasis on tactics, the internet, and how Republicans can begin to match the Democrats' deployment of web tools for fundraising, organizing, getting the message out, communicating to voters, and so on. Barack Obama set new heights for that in 2008, and the Republicans are aware that they need to catch up. And so there's multiple conferences here today that I never saw prior. In last year, and I've been to similar events in years prior to that even, I've never seen such an emphasis on how the internet can be used as an effective political tool.
What about message?
Well, that's what they're trying to figure out. There is no consistent message from what I can tell. There is sort of the politicians who speak repeat a lot of the same mantras you've seen from Republicans over the last 8 years and over the last 28 years. I mean, every single one of them is low tax, trickle-down economics, and opposition to what they call the big spending stimulus bill and the rest of Barack Obama's agenda. But there's not a lot of new ideas coming out of the politicians who speak here today. The conservative activists who speak are much more willing to say, look, we have to acknowledge this deficit of ideas, that we don't know exactly where we're headed and what our message represents, and it's silly for us to pretend like we can or that we do. And the first order of business is figuring out what we stand for, then we find people who can say it for us.
What is striking, though, and you pointed this out in one of the posts that you had on Mother Jones' blog, which is the extraordinary degree of anger, number one, that's reflected in things like some of the bumper stickers and even some of the book titles that we see in the exhibit hall. Right. The other thing was, you had made you had written something very interesting about that John Bolton speech on Thursday, where he made a reference to bombing Chicago, and people just applauded.
Right.
What is it? That says something. Does that say that there's something very dangerous that's sort of brewing in terms of the mood and the anger that's here?
Right. Well, the anger in previous years has been directed at Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. When I came this time last year, let's see, it would have been February of 2008, right, and so the Democratic primary was still in full swing, and it was still an opportunity to bash Hillary Clinton, who's been a favorite target and punching bag of the right for many years. This year, the anger is, I would say, equally sort of distributed amongst Democrats who are, being hit for the usual reasons, like I said, opposing Barack Obama's agenda as a tax and spend agenda, but also aimed at Republicans. And there's a lot of anger aimed at congressional Republicans, people that the activists here feel have failed them, not just in terms of keeping pace with the Democrats electorally, in terms of holding Senate seats and House seats, but also failed them in terms of their principles. A lot of them feel as though Republicans are Democrat light. I mean, you don't see this viewpoint anywhere else. You would never find a collection of people who feel as though the Republicans in Congress, who just stonewalled Obama's stimulus plan and not a single House Republican voted for it. Yet you find people here who feel as though the House Republicans, the Senate Republicans, Congressional Republicans, are too willing to compromise with the Democrats.
Well, if saying no on the stimulus package almost unanimously is a sign of not compromising, then what is?
I don't know. I don't know exactly what people here would want. I mean, look, if view the netroots as sort of an ideological anchor for the Democrats on the left, and that when most politicians, Democratic politicians in Washington they operate somewhere between the netroots and the political center, and that it is because the netroots exist that they sort of get pulled back to their roots on the left. This is the equivalent on the right. This is the body, these are the people, this is the ideology that pulls Republican politicians, when they operate in Washington, back to their roots on the right. And so I don't know that there's anything realistically that a Republican politician operating within the confines of the Senate and the House could realistically do to satisfy these people. I mean, you'd have to have Rush Limbaugh in office to satisfy these people, but they play a role in America's political life. They pull Republicans rightward.
So, is there anything in this conference that progressives should be watching for, be concerned about in the coming days and weeks?
Well, my first instinct is to say no, because I haven't been terribly impressed. I'm obviously not the target audience, but I haven't been terribly impressed. I mean, there was a panel on healthcare and how the Republicans are going to oppose universal healthcare when it moves through Congress, either this year or next year. And they brought a Republican congressman who happens to also be a doctor, who should be better versed in healthcare policy than your ordinary politician. And he spoke for a sort of chaotic and disordered 5 minutes, made a number of points about consumer-driven healthcare and private healthcare accounts that made almost no sense to me, and I cover politics and policy on a daily basis. And I'm sure went over the heads of the people who were listening. And with that, he sat down. And that was supposed to be the opposition to universal health care. I mean, when these people can't even articulate ideas or articulate policies that stand in opposition to Barack Obama's agenda, they're in trouble, especially when Obama can articulate his health care policy as simply as saying, we believe in universal health care. We believe that every American ought to have the health care they deserve. That's incredibly simple to understand. And the Republican opposition, from what I'm seeing here today, is nowhere near as articulate and nowhere near as concise. So I'm not worried on that front, or I don't think that Democrats should be worried on that front. I do think that Republicans are making gains with the internet. They're using Twitter effectively, and they're talking to each other now about how to use blogs and online fundraising effectively, how to use social media and online networks effectively. Michael Steele, the GOP chairman, the new GOP chairman, recently held a tech summit that I was at, where he brought the GOP's nerds essentially under the RNC roof and said, listen, I'm willing to listen to you guys. All of a sudden, for the very first time, the RNC values your ideas. And they're going to make gains on that. The American left cannot be complacent in terms of its use of web tools.
And probably in the long run can't be complacent in terms of the idea war either.
No, absolutely not. I mean, Clinton had had Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate when he took office in 1992. He lost it in 1994. And from that point forward, he had to battle a very, very entrenched Republican Congress for the rest of his presidency. I mean, Obama has to be careful that he doesn't suffer the same fate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.